This is our lesson for 7.2. This is about complementary and supplementary angles. And this should not be a new learning for you. You should have heard of these before in 6th grade. So let's go over them again. Complementary angles are two angles that add to 90 degrees. And that means that they form a right angle. Now, they can be two angles that are adjacent, like these two, where we can tell that when we put them together, they form a 90-degree angle. Or they could be two separate angles that maybe this one measures 45 degrees and the other one measures 45 degrees, where they're not even touching, they're not adjacent, but if we add them together, we get 90. So be on the lookout for situations where we have two angles that clearly, when they're put together, form this 90-degree angle here. And be on the lookout for angles that are not touching at all, that add up to 90 as well. Other vocab word for us in this lesson is supplementary angles. Supplementary angles add to 180 degrees, which means they form a straight angle. So like the example we just looked at for complementary angles, these are two angles. Here's one, and here is the other. And if you notice, when we put them together, the outside angle is a straight angle, so it's 180 degrees. And these can be, these can be adjacent, like you see here. They can also be two angles that are not touching. And maybe we know that this angle is 30 degrees, and this other angle over here is 150 degrees. And we know that if we add those two measurements together, we'll get 180 degrees. So, two examples of supplementary angles for you. If you move down the page, you're going to see some practice problems with this diagram right here. The first problem asks us to name a pair of supplementary angles. So when I look for supplementary angles, the first thing I do is I look for a straight angle. This is the easiest way to find supplementary angles. Find a straight angle. Find the two angles that are working together to make that straight angle. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to ask you to come up with your own example here. Okay? So here's a straight angle for me. I'm going to trace the whole thing. And you see how we have a ray coming off of this straight angle? And now we have two smaller angles. We have this guy right here. That's angle ACB. We also have this bigger angle over here, BCD. And together, if we put those two angles together, the outer edge forms that straight angle. So one pair of supplementary angles is angle ACB. The other angle in our pair would be angle BCD. Pause the video and try to find another pair of supplementary angles. We will talk about this tomorrow. I'm going to give you a hint. There are tons and tons and tons of supplementary angles in this diagram. All right, I'm going to clear off my writing here. Next question asks for a pair of complementary angles. Complementary angles, now I'm looking for complementary, so I'm looking for a right angle to start. And I'm going to look for a right angle that is split by a ray into two smaller angles. So I can see this box right here that tells me that angle CGD is a right angle. That tells me that all four of these angles, CGD, CGH, HGJ, and JGD, are all right angles. I'll put a little box there to prove it. Now, if I look at this right angle, angle DGJ, see how that's a right angle, but we're also splitting it with ray GI? Ray GI splits that right angle into two smaller angles. The first is angle DGI, and the second is angle JGI. There they are. Those two angles are going to be complementary because when we put those two angles together, they form a right angle on the outside edge. So my example of a pair of complementary angles are angle DGI and angle IGJ. Okay? So there are no other complementary angles in this diagram, so you don't have to find another pair. Just make sure you understand why they are complementary and how to find your own example of complementary angles in a diagram for tomorrow. I'm going to erase this one more time. Last thing we are asked to find is a pair of vertical angles. Remember, vertical angles, we are looking for an X. So I'm going to find where we have an X, and there are lots of them. I'm just going to choose this X right here. There's one line. Here's another line. Here are my 4 angles, 1, 2, 3, 4. So vertical angles would sit across from each other. So I am going to pick angle EDF and angle CDG. Those would be vertical angles to me. So angle EDF and angle CGD. There are many other types of examples of vertical angles in this diagram. So I do want you to pause the video right now, find another pair of vertical angles. If you want to challenge yourself, try another pair of angles that's not on the X that I pointed out to you. Come up with your own X. And I'll give you a hint. There's an X right here, this line, and this line. And there are some intersecting lines which can lead to vertical angles. But make sure you have an example of supplementary and an example of vertical that are yours, not mine. Number 4, this is the last problem that we're going to do together, and I'm just going to help you get started on this. You'll finish it tonight for your assignment. If you take a look at these two angles, take a look at this angle here and this angle here. If we put those two angles together, we can see that they are going to fit together and make a right angle. So we can say that those two angles are complementary. Now we are being asked to find the value of the variable. So we're asked to find r. So the first thing we have to remember is these two angles are complementary, so they add up. If we add those two angles up, we are going to get 90 degrees. So our job here is going to be to write an equation, and we are going to substitute the value for each equation into these two blank spots. And remember, when we substitute expressions or we substitute anything, we do it in parentheses. So my equation here will be the quantity of 7r plus 5 is equal to the quantity of 8r plus 9. Sorry, that's getting kind of tiny there. All right, so I'm going to try this one more time because that's too sloppy. 8r plus 9 and parentheses. Okay, so you know the deal here. We have to distribute the 1. Put a 1 in front of this guy, distribute it to get rid of those parentheses. The first set we can drop because there's nothing in front of it. Go ahead and solve that equation to determine what r is equal to. That is part of tonight's assignment. Okay, tonight's assignment. I did ask for another example in number 1 and number 3, so make sure you do those extra examples there for me. You're going to finish up problem number 4. We just got that one started. You're going to do number 5 and number 6 on your own. One of them is going to be dealing with adding up and equaling 180. The other one, you're going to have to use a little bit of supplementary and a little bit of complementary angles for that. Don't forget to do your Google form. And if I were you, I'm suggesting making some flashcards to start studying these angle pairs. We've already covered vertical angles, adjacent angles, complementary, and supplementary. We are still getting more angle pairs in the future, so make sure that you know all of that vocab. And a good way to do that is to study with flashcards. All right, that's all for today.